Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Georgiana with Expressions Craft Studio. This is week 9 for Project Christmas Cheer 2023. And these are the cards that we've previously worked on, and they're for this coming Christmas for the Angel Card Project and cards for soldiers. Now, as I stated in my last video, a lot of them still, well, in fact, all of them still need their inside sentiments. So let's get started, and I'll kind of show you what I did. So I've gone ahead and pulled some sentiments from various locations. There are a number of places where you can find any kind of sentiment, whether it's Christmas, birthday, sympathy. You can use cards you've received in the mail. You can also go on the internet and search for a variety of sources. Digital graphics resellers offer them, as well as you can find a lot on Etsy. So Creative Fabrica also has some, as well as the Hungry JPEG. So just, look around. You can just Google sentiments, or you can just, create your own. If you're crafty like that and a bit of a wordsmith, you can definitely create your own. Now, I like to retype my own because I have a large catalog of fonts, and I can pull in different fonts. I didn't get super creative with these files because I was in a hurry to get them done, because there was 89, I believe, total cards. So I just wanted to crank them out. But in the future, I hope to get a little bit more creative and fancy, if you will, with the cards that are the insides of the cards that I'm going to do. So I created these in my digital editing software, and I put 4 to a page, and I did 8 total, so there were 2 pages. I also set them up so that they would print out in portrait and landscape, because cards go either way depending on the card. And there's a number of ways you can cut these out. I decided to use dies to cut mine out, but you could certainly cut them out with whatever paper trimmer cutter you're using. The Scan and Cut will cut them out. Your Cricut would even write them out for you if you wanted to, and then cut them out. So you do have a lot of options. Just use what you have, and you can make it work, and you can make it look nice. So I went through and selected several different dies that I liked. I usually use the decal edge dies, but I've used those a lot lately, so I tried to just stick with something a little bit more traditional, I guess, a little more rectangular. So this is a little bit thicker copy paper than what you normally buy. I believe it's 28 pound. So what I go through and do is I will sort them out in stacks of 2 or 3, because it is a little thicker. And then I would kind of align it up and staple them down in the corner so that you don't have to worry about them shifting when you're cutting them. Sometimes I don't bother to staple them, but there's like a lack of static electricity here for some reason, so everything keeps wanting to shift. So I decided to go ahead and staple them. And once I had them stapled, I just lined my die up on top, making sure that the staple wasn't underneath the die, because you don't want to ruin your die. So I just put the staple down in the very corner so that it's out of the way of the die. And before I stapled, I kind of lined them up, so that the writing looked to be fairly aligned as I held it up to the light. And then I just position my die, try to get it as centered as possible so that it looks good to the eye. It's, it doesn't need to be exact. You could even use multiple staples if that helps, but because of the way I trimmed the paper, and I didn't feel like I left myself enough room with this particular die. It would have been okay with the other die that I'm going to use, but not so much with this one. But honestly, I didn't feel like I needed an extra staple, but that is an option for you as well. So I'm pulling up a little bit of tape to help me make sure that the die doesn't shift as I'm placing it into my cutting machine. Again, that's optional, but for something like this, where, you want it to look nice when it's done, I do recommend tape. So I'll make a little room here, and we will bring in the cutting machine, the die cutter / embosser. And I didn't realize I had left the blue plate laying on the back of it, so I'm going to knock it off here in a second. So I like to use a metal shim with my Magic Mat. I just feel like I get a better cut. But use whatever works well for you. I do find that when I use the Magic Mat with the metal shim, I get a really good cut. Plus, because I tend to roll forward and backward, the Magic Mat seems to help the die not shift, and it can shift, which means you won't get a really clean cut. But for me, I have found that the Magic Mat seems to eliminate that problem for the most part. I think most people recommend that you don't roll it backwards, but for me it's just easier than trying to reach over the machine and grab the sandwich and keep it all together when I pull it through. So now I'm just removing this outer edge, and I'm going to toss it in the trash. You can see my staple there. It was nice and out of the way. And now we'll remove the die, or the sentiment pieces, I should say. And it gets a little tricky when I get to the tape. It's hard to know where to hang on to stuff sometimes, but there are my 2 die cuts for this sentiments, and then the next stack I do will have 3 in it. And in total, I see I did, 15 times 8 is 120. Does that sound right? And I ended up with 32 left. One I kind of tore up taking the tape off a little bit, and then a couple of the smaller snow globes that I did. If you've watched those series, you know that they were really tiny. These sentiments were just too big, so I ended up stamping them. So all in all, I ended up with 32 of these sentiments left over, which I will put in my sentiment folder, and I will use them in the cards that we do in the coming weeks. So here I'm just centering the die as best as I can. And again, I'm going to tape it down just to make sure it doesn't shift. My Magic Mat is warped. I've used it so much, it's probably time for a new one, but it still cuts pretty good. I maybe shouldn't be lining my stuff up on top of it since it's got a big hump in it, but limited desk space, you have to be creative. So we'll remove again the outer edge, or the waste paper, whatever you want to call it. It didn't seem to cut all the way through, so I'm going to need to get my trimmer out and trim that a little bit. But that's okay, because I'll show you how I do it, which works really good on a straight edge. It doesn't always work as well on a non-straight edge, but this should work out nicely because it leaves a nice impression in the paper even though it doesn't cut it all the way. And this little fingertip knife is the best one I've found for this kind of stuff. It's made by Fiskars, and I found that for me, I have the best control with this little knife. Again, it's personal preference. Do what works for you. But this works well for me. And the die mostly cut through. There's just this one little strip here. And it's possible I've damaged the die, or the die was not made well, or maybe I didn't have it on the mat correctly, like maybe I didn't have it completely over the metal cutting shim, because that can make a difference too. I do think that the slower I go, the better cut I tend to get. And my blade's getting a little dull, so I probably will want to replace that soon. It's doing more tearing than cutting. But there you go. 3 more sentiments to add. So I will do these in stacks of 2 and 3. So it's going to take me all afternoon to get them done. But once I get them finished, I'll go through and I'll just randomly select a sentiment to put inside of a card, these first 89 cards, until they're completely done. And then we'll be starting from scratch, and my goal is to not let them stack up like that, to just go ahead and finish them completely before I put them in the bin. But you can do this, you could even use this on colored paper if you wanted to. You could make them round. I have some that I have some snow globes cards that I should probably cut some out in a round shape. If I can make these fit some way, somehow, I'll probably just use these, but in the future I would go ahead and make myself a sentiment that'll fit inside the round die and do it that way. And I do plan on doing another video here soon. I don't know when exactly, but it will be to show you how to gather sentiments from different places and then print them out, maybe save some for your stash. I do have a stamp positioning tool, but I tend not to use it with my stamps because it's just more work for me. But that's why I tend not to stamp my images, because I can't really get them straight most of the time. And once I finished a card, the last thing I want to do is mess it up with a crooked sentiment, which I've done. Most of us have. So that's why I prefer to print these kind of things out that go in the center of the card. It's just easier for me. And then I can have them in my stash. And this is my little notebook here that I keep them in. And I've got birthday sentiments in here already, some happy anniversary sentiments. I believe there's even some sympathy sentiments as well. And I will take and add all of the extras that I have from this Christmas batch to the inside of here, so that and I have a couple more of these blank. They're actually photo holders. I think I got these from Dollar Tree. I might have even got them on Amazon, I'm not sure, but I got like a 6-pack. And I intended to put some of my smaller dies in them, but they don't really hold up to that kind of use. But they're really nice for this. So I do use them for ephemera or sentiments. So thanks for joining me, and I hope I see you next time. Happy crafting.